Welcome to the Indonesia Project's COVID-19 webinar series. My name is Arianto Patunru and I'm hosting this event with Nur Kamala Mulyani and Baskara Adiwena. We acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians and pay our respect to the elders and past and present. We are grateful for the support from the Australian National University and the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Today, our topic is COVID-19 and rural livelihoods in Indonesia, assessing the consequences of COVID-19 for food security. And we have our esteemed colleague, Associate Professor John McCarthy from ANU. And I understand this is a collaboration between Australian National University, Universitas Indonesia, Gadjah Mada, and Universitas Sumatera Utara. So I will let John to introduce his distinguished team members, and then from then John will start the presentation. So John, over to you.
Okay, thanks Archer, and thanks to the Indonesia Project for inviting me to, or inviting us to give this presentation. So this activity began as a project, an Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research project to look at the impact of COVID-19 on various parts of Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So we, Indonesia is such a huge country and so variable, we decided to collaborate across several Indonesian universities to try and get a picture of what's going on. So I'll just introduce you to everyone. Of course, you probably all know Ibu Yunita, who is coming back to ANU virtually today. She's from the Anthropology Department in UI. And we have Mas Made from PSKK at UGM, zooming in from Gadjah. And we also have Pakurino, I can't see him there, also from the Anthropology at UI, a colleague of Ibu Yunita's, who was very, very generous to join us today. We have a couple of other people who are unable to join us. It's Henry Satoris from USU in North Sumatra, and Vania Budianto from ANU. She's probably out there listening somewhere, but she also involved in this activity. So we had quite a team. So I might just begin with the presentation then. Let me just, okay. Okay, hopefully you can see that.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, so just go back in time a little bit. The Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research did an earlier set of research on the initial impacts of COVID-19, and they asked a wide set of people at ANU and their networks to follow up. So what we're trying to do is to understand the impacts of COVID-19 on rural livelihoods. In the absence of systematic data, all the economists like to have systematic data and evidence, but we're struggling to get this from rural Indonesia. So what we did as qualitative researchers, this never holds us back for lack of quantitative data. So we jumped in here and used our networks to try and understand what's been going on. So we did 20 key informant interviews, and Henry helped design a survey that we did on WhatsApp, which we circulated into rural communities, and we got 100 informants to answer our questions. And then we also did an extensive review of newspaper articles between about February all the way till early June. So just as a way of a caveat for the following findings, you know, clearly Indonesia is incredibly variable and the situation is very dynamic. And clearly it's not possible to generalize. Now, I've just given you that caveat, but as people writing about things, we have to some degree, generalize. So there's that contradiction in our approach. So please bear in mind that this is a snapshot and that things have moved on since when we undertook this, but we think it does reveal some deeper trends. So what we did was focus on 5 main areas. We wanted to focus on areas with particular vulnerability or emerging hotspots, as well as major production systems. And we used the Food Security Atlas. I've got the picture here from the Atlas, which shows the areas with stunting, as a way to kind of conceptualize which areas of Indonesia are particularly suffering from undernutrition, where we've got pockets of undernutrition, as a way of focusing our study. So I won't dwell. I'm going to go through a number of these systems, and Ibu Yunita and Mas Made and Pak Rhino are going to talk about number one, the rice and vegetable producing areas, and I'll briefly touch on the other four. So before we did this, we were interested in thinking about what are the exposures and risks that Indonesia faces with COVID-19, particularly in terms of rural livelihoods. So although poverty in Indonesia has been falling, we've got this persistent problem of stunting. In fact, everyone likes to talk about how agriculture is not so important anymore, but 30% of the Indonesian workforce is still in agriculture. So it's the second largest employer. And 1 in 5 farming households are below the poverty line, and the stunting rate in Indonesia is around 31% of children. But in marginal areas, it's often, in lots of rural areas, the stunting rates are much higher. So when a shock occurs, and there's already a considerable number of people in the population who are undernourished, there are really considerable risks. So the second factor to think about is the structural deficit in rice and the high food prices. And I know Acho had already spoken at great length about this, so I won't dwell on that second point. The third point is exposure to climate change, pests and diseases. So there's a lot of research now linking harvest variability to climate change. And this last year, the rice production in Indonesia has been trending downwards with a 13% fall in harvests. And particular parts of Indonesia have been particularly badly hit. For instance, Nusa Tenggara experienced a severe drought, which has been linked to the Indian Ocean dipole. The fourth factor is a widespread shift in many parts of Indonesia, particularly outer island Indonesia, to new non-food crops, with increasing shortages of land for food production. And across Indonesia, most people are becoming net food buyers. So amongst the poor, they spend about 60% of their monthly expenditure on food. And there's less of land available for growing food in many outer island communities in Sumatra and Kalimantan, particularly. Fifthly, we get a dependence on labour market off-farm opportunities and remittances. In fact, even in rural communities, the FAO has published a report suggesting that around 50% of income comes from activities off-farm. So people are highly diverse in their livelihood strategies, so that if someone loses their job or if someone comes back from the city, one strand of the household's income falls over. So this makes people very susceptible to shocks like the one that COVID-19 is creating. The sixth point is the forest transition. Large areas of Indonesia have been in a transition out of forest landscapes. And there's a lot of evidence now that this is leading to declining ecological functions, and it also reduces opportunities for the poor to get things from the forest, to get fruit and to hunt. And also, it also means that there are less opportunities to open Sweden as they did in the past when there was a crisis. And finally, women are particularly exposed to this sort of crisis because, you know, there's a lot of evidence now suggesting that when labour markets shrink and when farm opportunities also decline, women are particularly affected first. And because women manage the household budgets to a certain degree, this can have severe nutritional outcomes. So before I hand over to Ibu Yunita and her colleagues, I just wanted to make a few points about our overall findings, and then I'm going to return and talk about some of the other production contexts. Clearly, COVID-19 is having a really profound impacts on rural livelihoods. It's really a pandemic combined with a very severe, what economists would call a demand shock. And this has upset the balance in the Indonesian food system. So historically, Indonesia's value chains and supply chains are very complex, involving complex layers of buyers and sellers across production, distribution and consumption. And when we get a shock like this, pandemic plus households with limited or falling ability to buy food, it really disrupts these chains. And although there are some people that are well positioned to move ahead and to dominate these chains, the question is, how are these value chains going to restructure? The second point is people increasingly taking up local coping strategies, including going back to agriculture. And Ibu Yunita and the colleagues are going to talk about this. But one of the problems here is that there's limited access to inputs and reduced incentives for people to produce things for the market because people can't afford a lot of things. So this is going to have an impact on supply of food stock over the long term, or possibly it will, depending on what happens. Since our report has been written, there's been a lot of changes going on. So the next point is there are clearly a lot of state interventions which have ensured that the supply of staples hasn't really collapsed. They've been quite successful, it seems, in making sure that staples are still available. And there's also been the large rollout of social protection interventions to soften the impact. I think this has also been in earlier webinars in this series. But nonetheless, what we're seeing is a shift to what we might call detrimental livelihood patterns and food consumption strategies. What do I mean by that? People are selling assets, cutting back on food, particularly protein, and this is going to have a long-term impact. So I'll just pass over to Ibu Yunita at this point.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I will share my screen. Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you very much. Is it okay now?
Oh, good.
That's okay. Thank you very much, John, and also the invitations for us to share our findings. So we did an interview through what you call it, WhatsApp call and etc. And farmers also kept sending us the photos from their fields. So thank you for all the facilitation that help us to provide this brief finding. Yeah? So we will talk about the food production and farmers' livelihood in Java. So thanks to Rino, who helped me also to collect data, and Pak Made, I will talk about the rice production, and Pak Made will continue with the horticultural crops. Sorry. Why? Yeah. Now, if we would like to talk about the impact of COVID-19 to farming communities in Java, we have to realize the diverse types of farming community in Java. Like John said, that Indonesia is very variable, yeah, and dynamics. So the first is the rice baskets of Java. Thanks to James Fox, so I use your term of rice baskets from your article about rice baskets of Java. So the farming communities in the rice baskets of Java are dominantly rice farming communities, particularly on the north coast of Java, but also some rice baskets in hinterland of Java. So rice, as we all know that it's political commodity, and this is for national distribution and also to fulfill the consumption of Indonesian people. Now, it doesn't mean that they do not have any other income generation. Yes, they also planted, for example, watermelon and vegetables during the third season, and also have off-farm source of income. The second is the self-sufficient rice farmers, that farmers do not sell directly the farmers to the distribution, the national distribution of rice. They consumed for household consumptions, but they rely on the secondary and off-farm income generation for household needs. So this is from secondary and horticulture crops and food stalls and snacks and other possibility of income generation in the village. Now the third is the dominant horticulture crop production farming communities. So they sell horticulture products as the main source of income. And among these three types of farming community in Java, I think this is the last one. Number 3 is the most vulnerable farming communities. Now, I will go first to the rice production in Java. The rice production actually has kept going on without significant disruption from COVID-19. The farmers told me that, yeah, we can continue our production, no disruption, and the wage laborers still being paid by us. But now they have to go on under the risk of ongoing climate change and farmers' ill-wise chemical use. So the late start of rainy season planting due to long drought, El Nino, like what John said in East Nusa Tenggara. In 2019, from mid of May, there was no rainfall until November 2019, and it led to a late start planting in the 2020 dry season and late harvesting. What happened? Again, brown plant hopper outbreaks and other pesticides infestation were there. So it is scary if so one farmer sent me this picture, part of his field, but also many other rice fields on the north coast of West Java were severely damaged due to brown plant hopper outbreaks. On the south, some farmers told me about white or yellow rice stem borer, and also water scarcity in the dry rain-fed fields and the critical states of grain formation. Why? Because of the late start of planting seasons. Some farmers just started in end of January and some in early February. It is uncommon. Usually they already start planting in December. Now, this is, I also use the photo from James, and this is still the cocktail of pesticides was still going on, used by farmers, and this created the vulnerability situation of rice fields under the ongoing climate change. So it is on top of this. This is the most challenging problem for farmers. Now, how about the constraints from the pandemic situation? Yeah, some explain about the increased price of inputs, yeah, fertilizers, and chemical pesticides. And then Rino will talk more about the low price for dry grains. So the HET, harga eceran itu, dropped, yeah, because the large middlemen could not come into the village area, so they have a very low harga jual, yeah, gabah. Now, they have a longer period of harvesting, and because the middlemen also have difficulties in distributing the grains, so there were also late payment by middlemen, and all of this combination is the constraints of capital formation for the next planting season. Now, this is a farmer just to send me a picture of how they also have to practice social distancing. So during harvesting, but this is only in some areas, yeah, the other areas are not practicing the social distancing. So husband and wife, a pair of husband and wife, threshing the paddy using different threshing tools. In Majalengka, West Java, the farmer came from Sumedang. This is at the end of rainy season 2019-2020, in April 2020, and how it constrained them. It took a longer time to accomplish the work. So it means the late start of planting season and then the late also harvesting, then it caused a constraint to get a cash. Now this one is the picture of back to normal distancing, threshing paddy in the dry season harvesting of 2020, just recently, August 2020. So it's like John said, it's like nothing happened now. It's okay, we are in the green zone according to the farmers. So this is back again to their practice, yeah. Now Rino will continue with the pandemic and threats for farmers' livelihood, continuing the brief overview of what is happening in the field.
Thank you, Prof. Yunita, and thank you for all the panelists and organizers to allowing me to contribute in this session. Pak John. I think as we understand that multiple livelihoods are common among Indonesian farmers in rural area, so they are moonlighting for complement their income for cash money. And how in our understanding that the pandemic situation is limiting all farming jobs available. It means limiting cash money. As Yunita said, that the production is still going on, but they don't have enough cash because some farmers, because the middleman cannot buy the rice. So some of them kept the rice for consumption, but not much selling them to the middleman. And the price during the first harvesting season in April is lowering. It's it's a lower price in April and May, and but some farmers still sell it because they have no other resource for cash money. And but during the second harvesting period this year in August, the price is getting better now, according to some farmers. And in the context of rural livelihood, remittance is a main income for cash money. And during this pandemic situation, less and less work in the city, and some family member who working in the city also went back to the village, and it creates also another burdens other than less remittance from the city. And also we found out that the distribution of government aid is constrained by the confusing data, like some families get double distribution, and the other families didn't receive at all. And from our findings also, we find out that the consumption during Eid Mubarak is a peak season of consumption, mostly in Indonesia, high, but during this pandemic, they say that is less spending. So they only spend for main meals, but no for clothes, and no for like renovating houses like how they used to do during the Eid Mubarak. So that's points of we found out that how pandemic threats farmers' livelihoods, open the vulnerability that's already there in the rural area. Yeah.
Now, so how about the horticultural farming communities? There's a sudden loss of income. So if we use Amartya Sen's entitlement set, so this is the failure of farmers' entitlement set derived from marketing horticulture products. So yeah, like we mentioned already, that the loss of cash is the main source, yeah, of income that could be generated actually in the normal situation from growing and selling secondary and horticulture crops. Now it's failed to market the products, especially for exports. This is total failure. It's stopped totally. They cannot sold it through the export marketing channel. So they have to sell it for local consumption in a much lower price. So the quality is high, but the price is much lower because this is just for local consumption. And regional market also failed to distribute the products. Now the off-farm secondary income generation, mainly for the rural people, it generated from producing and selling homemade snacks or foods, like in Trenggalek in East Java, like around 100 food stalls selling their kerupuk, yeah, their what you call it, homemade snacks made by women. It suddenly could not sell any products. So this affects severely women's ability to earn cash for daily needs. They are the ones who produce the homemade snacks, foods. Now they can only sell it among their neighbors, and it is a much lower, offset. Yeah. Okay. So this is the situation of the farmers, especially those who earn the income from marketing horticulture products. So Pak Madi will continue. So this is the photo of how it's just there, cannot be sold. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Bu Yunita. I will continue to do discuss about the horticultural crops farming in more focus in Central Java. You know that in Central Java we have some center of production in horticultural crops, like in Kopeng, around Magelang, and also Bandungan in Central Java, also Dieng and Tawangmangu, but also in some part in Yogyakarta, like in Cangkringan, around Cangkringan. That's all of in the mountain area. So in the context of COVID, they have a problem with how they sell the production, because in the past, like in Dieng and Bandungan, for example, they sell all, for the bigger farmer, they sell the production to Jakarta, to the city, big city, also with what Yunita said about the good quality. So they sell to the Jakarta, Bandung, and also Semarang. But now, because the lockdown policy, also the problem is that's what Yunita said, all of the farmer, what I try to talk with them via WhatsApp, they said that's now the what you call like the decline of the consumption, decline of the demand from the consumption. If we look,
Mohon maaf, Pak Made.
Yes.
There is a clarification question from Pak Richard Borsuk. What are examples of horticultural crops?
Yes. Yes, like a vegetable. Yeah, vegetable, because if we in that area, that's the center of vegetable. So in the time of COVID, what Yunita said also, they just put away the vegetable, because not much demand come to the village, and especially for the we classify from the level of the status of the farmer, for the farmer who has a lot of land. The impact is not, they cannot sell the production to the big city, but also for the small farmer. And especially when we try to classify the time, they start from Ramadan until the end of June. You know that because in Ramadan, normally, like last year, previous year, that's a lot of consumer coming. Also, the price is up, but now until the end of June, still the price is still low. And you know that in Java, especially in Java, after Ramadan, after Lebaran, Idul Fitri, normally we have a bulan besar. In that time, normally wedding ceremony, a lot of wedding ceremony everywhere in Java. But this year, wedding ceremony stopped. Or if they have still a wedding ceremony, just not much people they come. So the problem is catering for food not working. That's why the problem coming. Also in the crop market, like in Solo, in Jogja, like in Pasar Malioboro, Pasar Beringharjo, and also Pasar Gede in Solo, I tried to contact some informant there. They said that this year, very bad for the business, and very bad for the vegetable, also the horticultural crops in that time. Okay, please send Bu Yunita. What the impact for the household economy? I think Bu Yunita also said, also Mas Rino said before, that very bad, especially for the lower class. For the lower class, the situation is very bad for them, even though they got some bantuan from government, but still not enough that money. But for the young people, for the young farmers, they try to have to do the online shop, but not much. Not a lot of people can do that. Just only for the young. They start in. I know in Bandungan, for example, also in Magelang, they start to to sell their product by online. But I think that in general, this is not enough for the economic situation, for the economic situation in for the farmer in vegetable and agriculture. Sorry. Okay, I think it's enough, Yunita.
Yeah, please, Rino, you have. Hello, Rino.
Yeah, yes. In some situation, this pandemic also bring I don't know whether it's new hope or maybe open up possibilities that before that unseen before. Yeah, like some farmers in my network also try to improve their self and how to use marketing online platform and through WhatsApp or marketplaces such as Sophie and other popular marketplaces in Indonesia. And some also registering in relation with that situation. They're also registering their brands and products and use it as a collective name, so other farmers also can use that brand because it's already registered to the local authorities related to the distribution of foods. And it is also interesting situation that this situation also creates opportunity for some farmers who already not well known as a knowledgeable as farmers who has initiative. For example, those who are learning about improving their knowledge about climate change and pest management and everything. There's a lot of platforms that accommodate their involvement, and they can be involved in the discussion, in the webinars, and seen by people from Indonesia because it's aired in internet. So it's just interesting that there are opportunities, there are new possibilities in the situation. And also, I don't know whether this is good or not, but they're also thinking about diversifying commodities and reactivate local food security. Some farmers planning to some communities plan to reactivate that, like such as Lumbung or other. I don't know yet how it started, but the initiative is came up. Yeah, Yunita.
Okay, go on, you. Yeah. So there are examples of farmers' creativity during pandemic. So those who without any property right and access to rice field, like in Karangpakuan on the vicinity of Jati Gede Reservoir, Sumedang. So they try to plant kangkung, vegetable for daily menu in their household yard. Also jai merah, so red ginger, the popular local ingredient for traditional herbal drink. Actually, this is a potential, opportunity for farmers to plant and to produce local herbs, local herbs, because now like everybody try to improve their immune system. So these are two examples of how the farmers try to use whatever land they have to plant vegetables and herbal. So, and then this is Rino's experience. Yeah, Rino, this is an increased urban farming activities. Yeah.
Yeah, this is also interesting. I think it's also a question of space, question of how we are going to fulfill our needs of food. I think it's sporadic at the moment, but there is an interesting initiatives from, for example, in Jakarta and other places like in Bogor, because in residential area they have to provide space for social purposes, jadi ruang-ruang sosial, and some of them occupied their spaces and to do the urban farming. I think this is also interesting to see relation between the rural-urban relation and how the politics of space in the small scale, in the larger scale. Right? I think this is also interesting activities that probably can be we can understand more in the upcoming research. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, this not only actually not only for food, for consumption, but also for recreational. Not only plants but also animals, recreational animals. It's also in Bogor is now more and more people doing gardening at home for not only for food but also for recreational.
Yeah. And from the farmers in the hilly areas, in the mountainous areas, who also rely previously on planting vegetables in the state-owned property, perhutani. Now, based on their own initiative, they plant annual trees of various kinds of fruits. Of course, according to them, so selling durian, for example, is higher value than vegetables, with a very fluctuation, what you call it, a price and uncertainty. So it gives them more certainty to earn some cash, but yes, it takes a longer time. So this is in Pengalengan, West Java. So, and with this, we would like to say thank you for your attention to hear our presentation. Yeah. So I go back to you, John. Yeah, please.
John, we can't hear you, John, for some. John, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, good now. Okay. Go ahead.
All right, so let's just share this one. Okay, so I'm going to now whiz through a few production systems without taking up too much time, hopefully. So we start off with oil palm. As you would know, there's about 2.4 million smallholders planting oil palm and an estimated 10 million workers or casual labourers in the oil palm sector. And in this sector, starting rates tend to be high. For instance, in Asahan and Langkat, we have stunting rates around 40% in Asahan and over 50% in Langkat in North Sumatra. So these areas are particularly vulnerable to food insecurity. And there's a couple of points I'd like to make about this. Firstly, demand for estate crops has really fallen with storage facilities becoming congested. A lot of independent mills reduced their working hours or even closed, and companies began to prioritise their own production and stopped buying much from independent smallholders. And in May 2020, Henry's research revealed that the fruit price for oil palm had dropped by about 40% in many of the villages in North Sumatra, with a severe impact on the income of farming households. It's gone up a little bit since then. The second impact was on labour. Farmers had the same operational expenses, even though the price for their fruit had fallen. So there was less demand for labour as independent smallholders turned to their own family for labour. So a lot of the casual labourers found less work. And if they were infected with COVID-19 or tested positive, they faced being laid off by the plantations in some cases. So, and also work opportunities in the plantations have also been reduced. On top of that, people in the oil palm areas can no longer really grow padi ladang or dryland rice cultivation as they did in the past, particularly in Sumatra. So there's less opportunities for them to plant food crops. And to make it a bit more of a perfect storm, many migrants from the cities lost work. And one of our study villages, 130 people came back from the city just to one village. So putting a lot of burden on the family. So these factors suggest that we're going to get deep forms of vulnerability in these landscapes. So moving on to fisheries, there's 8 million fisher families or people involved in the fishing networks across Indonesia. 25% of these are below, the people from this community, the poor in this community, make up 25% of the population in Indonesia that's below the poverty line, which is quite a shocking statistic. So there's a lot of poverty in fisheries before the crisis. So what we have then is just transport and movement restrictions, restrictions with physical distancing, leading to bottlenecks in these value chains, reducing market access. And then we get the contraction in demand that we saw in Java. So we get stories in the newspaper of fish traders throwing their fish away. Fish prices, according to some reports, dropped from 50 to 75%. And most worrying for anyone who's visited the uplands of Kalimantan or Sumatra, where people mainly live on ikan kering, dry fish. This is the food of the poor. The price for the ikan kering has dropped from 5,800 to 8,000 rupiah, down to 1,500, suggesting the poor are consuming much less of this dried fish, which is one of their main sources of protein. So fishermen themselves are caught between rising operational costs and falling incomes. And some of our informants were talking about potentially this creating a vicious circle of declining fishing effort, falling incomes and declining nutrition. And women in the trading networks also severely impacted. And finally, we get the emergence of e-commerce, which Mada was talking about. Artisanal fishers lack formal credit and have become more dependent on the traders known as tungkulak. And some intermediate traders have been able to make very large profits. So what we see in the fishing sector, like in the sectors that Mada and colleagues were talking about, is that at the level of the fishermen, the price is very low, but it doesn't necessarily mean in the market in the city the price is low. So we get people in the middle making considerable profits. So this disturbance to value chains is really significant. Okay, so this is the last of our production systems. It's a vast question to talk about two areas like this in one slide, but I'm going to do it. Nusa Tenggara is, of course, the driest province in Indonesia and has quite high stunting rates. Unfortunately for Nusa Tenggara, they had the same climate impacts as we had in Australia, but they also had pest infestations. For instance, there are reports that the swine flu has decimated the pig industry in Timor, and the fall armyworm has decimated the corn. Reports of 50% loss of yields in corn and rice in some parts of Timor, and a large-scale reduction in farming incomes. On top of that, we get the pandemic impacts leading to economic shocks. So one newspaper report on a survey in Nusa Tenggara suggested that all the farmers they were interviewing were uncertain over whether they would be able to sell their products for cash in order to buy food. So it's hard to put all of these reports in context. We would need a follow-up survey to really understand whether that's actually occurred. And also cattle markets have closed in many parts of Nusa Tenggara. I don't know whether that's still the case now, but when we were interviewing people in many places, that's what happened. And of course, cattle are the main way that people make savings for times of crisis. But in this crisis, they can't really sell their cattle. The good side, though, which comes out in Mas Rino's presentation, farmers are highly diversified and are also very quick to adapt to some extent. And we see exchanges across extended kinship networks across rural and urban areas, and we see all these other traditional coping strategies. So nonetheless, if the crisis goes for too long, we're going to see significant problems. Okay, so now just moving on to Papua, I've only got 2 points to make about Papua. Firstly, we see reduced subsistence capacity in Papua. By that I mean only 25% of people are fully food self-sufficient in Papua these days, because most of them have been depending on ruskin and imported rice from Java. And also with large-scale land changes, especially with very large oil palm concessions being opened there, a lot of people can't go back to traditional agriculture. So many people we interviewed in Papua were worried about what this would mean for food security in Papua. As most food is imported, what happens if with disruptions in logistics, etc.? But it seems as though this issue has been handled by the Indonesian government quite successfully, although we were unable to tell whether these logistic problems were extending into upland areas. The second point is that Papuans are going back to traditional agriculture wherever they can. However, migrants and those working in the city who are dependent on cash incomes are really in a much more difficult position, as well as those who can't go back to traditional agriculture. But the Papuan government's putting enormous effort into trying to revive traditional forms of agriculture. Okay, so I'm sorry to be going so fast. How do we sum up these impacts overall, I guess, across these five different production systems? So this is what I want to talk about next. And then there's only one more slide after this. So what we can see if we stand back and reflect over the story we've all been telling you, and we think about historically, traditionally farmers valued diversification. They only had one foot in the market and they kept one foot in cash crop production in many cases. However, as they move into becoming smallholders, they become more orientated to cash crop production in many places. And of course, there's a spectrum across Indonesia. Like in Java, you saw, people still have a subsistence part to their livelihood in the lowlands, but in the uplands, they're totally cash producers, cash croppers. So when people typically think about the orientation to the market as a good thing, and it was a good thing in the 1998 crisis, you might remember. All the people in outer island Indonesia were doing quite well, mainly. But in this crisis, those dependent on the market are the most severely impacted. So if we think about it, if you might be tempted to look for some kind of linear explanation of what's going on, but I think it's more useful to think about what we call contextual vulnerability. So we need to look at how COVID-19 interacts with all these dynamic institutional, economic, social and economic structures and processes. So the impact you can see is highly differentiated. And the vulnerabilities and risks are often specific to particular production systems. Okay, so just to go through these little boxes very briefly, you can see those households with diversified incomes and still with subsistence elements to their livelihoods are less susceptible to these shocks. And we see this in lowland Java, where the terms of trade for those producing staples has only fallen a little bit. However, households who are specialised, who are overly dependent on a single commodity, for instance, fishers, rubber producers, coffee producers are all suffering because, according to the material we were reading back in May and June, I don't know whether this is still the case, prices had fallen up to 50% in all these products and 40% for oil palm producers, producing welfare crises for the poor in these communities. Thirdly, those dependent on precarious wage labour, those without land, and those with low capacity to grow things, or those integrated into these value chains that have been really disturbed, are also very vulnerable, as well as women working in the informal sector. So finally, if you go down to the bottom little bar in this diagram, you can see this impact on protein and what medical people call bioavailable nutrients. By this I mean, if you eat a chicken or a fish, there's all kinds of nutrients that you can immediately absorb. But if you eat some kind of starchy vegetable, you find it very difficult to get your nutrients. So what the challenge is with this crisis is how can we avoid a vicious cycle of malnutrition and anemia? Okay, so this is our final. This be an opportunity to reset agricultural policy and research on agriculture. So these are four of the themes that sort of came out of our thinking. Firstly, we see this crisis in value chains, which we've discussed about. You saw it really clearly in the Java cases. This reveals the vulnerability in the way these chains are organised. So the temptation is to restructure them using e-commerce and apps and all these sorts of things. However, this could really deepen inequality if it's not done carefully. It could leave a lot of people vulnerable, particularly people who are living in areas where there isn't good internet or good telephone coverage, or people who are not electronically literate. The second theme that comes out is the real susceptibility of those integrated into the market on precarious terms, which is a phenomenon we've really watched over the last couple of decades. If I was a farmer, I would want a subsistence element to my livelihood. I would want to avoid over-specialization, and I would want to revisit the coping strategies that worked in the past or find new ones. So thinking in these terms, policy and research needs to support heterogeneity in agriculture. For instance, agroforestry, livelihood and crop diversification, building more resilient local institutions and knowledges, and avoiding one-size-fits-all approaches, avoiding the enclosure of large areas of land for plantation development. Thirdly, climate change and biosecurity are clearly making these things worse. So if we have a pandemic or a pest infestation or an economic shock, if we have climate change as well, the risks are going to be very deep, let alone if we have all these things happening at once. So we need to think about, or Indonesia needs to think about developing more robust food systems and coping strategies to deal with the threat of climate change. Finally, this is not just a crisis for value chains, it's also a crisis for social protection. So the great thing is that Indonesia now has a social protection system, which it didn't have in 1998, and that's been a considerable achievement, although it's been very difficult as well. The problem is that Indonesia is still really searching for a system that's robust and that that really is socially acceptable at the local level and that is simple enough to really function during a crisis. And a system that really fits with the logic of local institutions and local expectations. And at the moment, the system doesn't really work in that kind of way. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say today. The report is not yet available, but it will be soon. So I wish I could make it available for all of you to read, but thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, John and others. That's very fascinating. As usual, for participants, if you want to ask questions, you can raise your virtual hands, or you can write your question in the Q&A box. I see one hand raised there, and then I will also read some question in the chat box. First two questions are from Edward Buckingham and Jim Fox. Edward?
Thank you. Thank you, Arianto. John, absolutely fascinating. I love the value chain approach. Just back to palm oil for a second. Obviously, that was a low point in May 2020 with the CPO price. It's come back up a bit. How are the volumes? It sounds from what you said that there's been a bit of a rupture in terms of the travel of palm oil through the value chain. Have we seen a decline in exports, a decline in refinery utilization as well?
Okay, can you hold on, John? So let's take a question from Jim. Jim, silakan Pak.
Okay, just thank you all for a fascinating presentation. You ended on social protection. Can I ask, how well is Raskin and other mechanisms of social protection, how are they functioning in Java and also, importantly, outside of Java?
Thank you, Jim. Over to you, John and team.
Okay, maybe I'll answer the first one and then I'll hand pass the second one to Ibu Yunita or Mas Made. So we did this study at a particular point in time, so we haven't been able to follow up what's been happening since then, although we would dearly like to if we could get some more funding to do some more work. I think what we found was, and what the newspaper reports were suggesting, is that oil palm companies have created electronic kind of management systems for their value chains, and they were still able to export to China and India to a certain degree, although it was shut down initially. So I read reports that oil palm companies were still making good profits. The thing was that with the way that the market has shifted, that they don't need to produce as much. So then they don't buy from all the surrounding smallholders. That seemed to be the major problem. So that all the smallholders were stuck in a deep hole. Not all of them. Some of them could still sell their oil palm because it's very variable. There's some places where we're still working, some places where it was shut down. And of course, the labourers are severely impacted as well. So, but that was back in May, June. It would be important to go and see what's happened now. It may well have shifted.
Okay.
So, Yunita, you maybe want to answer the second one about Ruskin or Made?
Yeah, but I think about bansos, bantuan sosial, prepared by the government from the central to down to the village level. The problem as raised by Rino is that the data that is in the hands of the government is not exactly mirror the reality. So farmers who have enough, for example, capital and belong to the rich, they received it. But those who are poor did not receive it. So this is, and one farmer said that we were asked to submit our data from Menteri Pertanian, from Menteri Dalam Negeri, from Menteri Kesehatan, and we submitted them all. But then when it returned to us, it's different data. So the problem of mismatching. Yeah? So this is the question, like what Rino said, that it is not quite okay, the data itself. Yeah. Maybe Rino can continue with the Ruskin and Pak Made also.
Can I just follow up on that, Ibu, before we turn to Rino and Pak Made? You mentioned that some of these farmers send you pictures via WhatsApp, assuming they have, so we assume they have sort of smartphones. Is by any chance they can also receive money transferred to them via online banking?
Yeah, from like if I need to transfer money to them, I use their account, reckoning account, not in some of my farmers just not banking, not e-banking, but just transfer to their account.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Bu. Pak Rino, silakan, Pak.
Yeah, there are various of system and resource for bansos, but in general there are two kind of bansos: the cash and BNPT, bantuan non tunai, ya, bantuan. And in this situation, in the pandemic situation, there's also a lot of resource because some budget are reallocated for COVID responses in many sectors. I mean, not only Ministry of Social Affairs, but also Ministry of Agriculture and other departments also reallocate their budget for bansos. Not only money, but also not only cash, but also, for example, foods, tobacco, and also other means of. At the beginning, the issues of data is very complicated, and it makes friction in the local level. It creates tension and friction among the villagers, not only in the village, but also in the urban and suburban areas. But I think the situation is getting better now. I don't know exactly what happened outside Java or Lampung, because it's the only two places that I understand. I mean, I know the information, but I think now it's getting better. In some area, they fix the data and they rearrange the distribution, and it works well in some way, but the question is for how long, because we don't know yet how things going in the next few months, and I think that's also the other than how they distribute it and how well the data is, also for how long they can the government or can hold this situation.
Okay. Pak Made, you want to add something?
Yes, yeah, just sort answered, I think. I agree with Pak John, Bu Yunita, and Rino. In the village, I think now they got some bantuan from several sources, like PBNT, Program Bantuan Non Tunai. That's Ruskin, Pak John, Pak Jim. Ruskin, because in the past they just got a Ruskin, beras, but now they got also beras telur, and sometimes also susu. But this is what kind of bantuan. Also now cash bantuan, yeah, bantuan in cash. In cash is 600,000 per month per household. But the problem is all of the bantuan also still use the static data before crisis, before COVID. If we know in the rural areas now, a lot of people come back from the urban areas because they lost the job, PHK in the urban areas, and now they live in the rural areas. This also making a problem in the little bit conflict with the situation in the rural areas because their household economics very bad. There's a bad maybe it's better the local people than the people who come back from the urban areas. So this is what we call like because the data static, but the situation now dynamics. That's not respond with the local with the government, but also if we look from the local people, local government, like desa also, they have a program on dana desa. They can use also the dana desa for the for bantuan for the people. But still, you know that for a long time, there's a lot of discussion in rural areas about who can get this bantuan and who knows. I think that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Made. Next, I'll collect questions from Pipa Amanta, Jeff Nielsen, and Cynthia Hunter. Pipa?
Thank you, Pak Acho, and thank you, Pak John, Pak Made, Pak Rino, and Bu Yunita for the wonderful presentation. Very insightful. If you don't mind, I'll stick in 2 questions, actually. The first one, I'm curious to hear what the role of Bulog has been throughout the crisis. Because I think earlier in the pandemic, there's also been reports that Bulog have been facing trouble procuring rice and etc. from villages who decided to sort of like hold their own stock throughout the pandemic. So have you seen them playing a bigger role as an off-taker to help farmers? And then my second question, so following up on your last slide about this is an opportunity to reset agriculture. So Pak Jokowi allocated about 104 trillion, I think, on food security, but that also includes on food estate. So what do you think then should be the priority of where the money should go towards? Thank you so much for the discussion.
Thanks, Pipa. Jeff, are you there?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Acho, and thanks to all the presenters. Again, fascinating series of discussions there. My question is a little bit related to the one there from Philippa regarding Bulog, or the logistical question. I guess I'm trying to get a bit better clarification on the extent of the collapse of supply chains that seems to have occurred. I'm sort of hearing similar news coming out of the coffee growing areas where they're talking about price collapses, which is somewhat surprising because the global prices have not collapsed. In fact, they're higher than they were last year. And yet there's people talking about, it's gone down to 50% of last year's price. So it's somewhat perplexing. So I'm just trying to work out, is this still related to the first round of the PSBB social distancing that's caused it? Has it since improved? And just a bit of clarification exactly where these apparently massive bottlenecks are. Because as John mentioned there, the potential implications for food security in regions of actually getting food going the other way into rural areas could be massive as well.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Cynthia, on to you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you all for really fascinating presentations. It's been very interesting. My question is for John, please. You mentioned Asian swine flu that has been so devastating. I've just been working in Timor-Leste on the border with NTT, and it's African swine fever which has been so devastating. I was wondering if you could clarify for me, please.
Okay, thank you. So back to the panelists. John?
Okay, maybe I could answer Jeff and Cynthia's questions, and maybe we can pass off the other one to my colleagues. Jeff, that's a really interesting question, and it's sort of a puzzle that really needs a lot more research. But clearly, in the earlier period of the crisis, it was clear that the restrictions on movement, the local governments and even villages putting up policies to stop people moving in and out of areas was having an enormous impact. But those policies were really taken down. And so now I think people can move much more freely. But when we were doing the interviews, there were still barriers across provincial boundaries in some parts of Indonesia, so things couldn't go in and out. But they then loosened it so that food could flow in. But I think what seems to have happened is that these value chains have got entirely disrupted from all sorts of angles. Like the fishing one was the one I was following the most. And it seemed as though the fish auctioning sites were no longer functioning. People were afraid to go there, or there were limitations on that. And then there were the capacity of the trucks to move in and out all got disturbed. And so the whole thing just fell apart from so many different angles. And I'm not sure what's happened afterwards with the free movement of people, much freer movement of people now. It will be interesting to know what happens. But of course, every province seems to be very different. So for instance, Aceh is very locked up. And so it's very hard for things to move around there. Whereas North Sumatra seems to be much more fluid. And from what I can see about Java, from what Mas Mada was saying, it's also very different again. I might hand pass that to my colleagues to add something there. Cynthia, actually, you're right. I should have said African swine flu. My mistake. It's in
fever.
Our, yeah.
Fever, John.
Fever,
African swine fever.
Well, I had so much, I've misspoken there, so please forgive me on that. I'll pass on now to my colleagues who would like to answer the other question.
Yeah. Thank you for the question for the logistics. I think the logistics for the main commodity like rice was not at all, halted entirely. So, but lack of logistics, yes, but not being stopped entirely. So farmers could still produce as it is. And normally, and then send their products to the dealer and to the local, for example, traders. But the problem is that there was a constraint. There was a constraint that the big like traders could not come into the village on time, and they have to sell it, and then with the lower price. Then so it constrained their their cash that can be earned so that they can move on with the next planting season. So this is the problem with the the logistic question. Maybe Rino, you can mention more about the logistic for rice, and then for vegetables maybe Pak Madi. Yeah. Rino?
Yeah, Bu Yunita, I don't know much about how the situation, but I think as Jeff's question, I think Bulog will play more roles. I mean, they will play more. I mean, I assume that the situation creates the opportunity for state-owned companies. I mean, to play more on their role in one, particularly in a high value like rice. I don't know, yeah, because they also now use different platforms. They also, they also distribute it in a small scale communities products. I think that they will play more role. Yeah.
Right. Made, you have something to add?
Thank you. I think I want to answer two questions about the vegetable chains. First, I think the problem also coming from what we call lockdown kampung in the first time of the crisis, pandemic. All of the kampung everywhere in Java, I think especially for the young people, they start to lock down the kampung. So this is this means that the access to the kampung, to the village, it's difficult. That's why the vegetable problem coming, because the seller from the urban areas from the city cannot go directly to the village first. This making problem first, and then after that the price lower, and also the the problem with the vegetable in that area. The second thing about the policy, I think what I observed from first time of the crisis, the pandemic crisis, I think it's not only in the national level, but also in local level. The government, the local government has a problem with they are confused. They are confused how to deal with this problem, how to do, what they must to do with this situation. This one of the problem of coming from the local leaders, I think. I think in general, local leaders, they cannot do anything, especially for the local, in desa, for example, in Kabupaten. In the first time of the crisis from COVID-19, they are confused, they are bingung what they must do with this. Mm-hmm. The second thing, I think, I agree with the program of the Jokowi. A lot of program social protection coming to the village, to the people. But the problem, what we discussed before about the data. About the data, that's making a problem also in the local area. And what we must do in the future, I think. Now, what I observe in rural areas, the situation becoming better. Becoming better mean activities, the people in the local areas, they are a little bit normal. And then the economic becoming up and up, grow up. That's, I think, just short answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Made. I have 6 people on my list. Let me just read their names first. Hal Hill, Budi Reso Sudarmo, Pak Tommy Firman, Maxine Williams, Dirk Steinberger, and Andre Damaledo. So I'll take 3 at a time, starting with Mas Budi. Mas Budi, you there? If
yes,
not, okay, yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It is very interesting to learn more about what happened on the ground. So, however, I do need some clarification on exactly what is the effect of the pandemic toward food security, because I think this tangling between the COVID and the other impact is important. So based on your presentation, it seemed that the main shock is the fact that export has been declined, ability to export. However, how that linked to farmers is not that clear. Yes, isn't it then locally will be more available with a lower price, at least temporarily, yeah? So it doesn't seem that situation directly linked to the issue of food security in the rural area. Yes, it probably linked to in urban area in which transportation has been an issue, but in rural area, it was a puzzle how exactly to explain the COVID, and in an area in which there is no mix between food production and estate production. So Sumatra is not the case, because Sumatra is relatively mixed between food and state production. So then food insecurity wouldn't be suffer if, for example, in the area in which only state crop production. So the local market for food, it wasn't there. Now, then there is the Indonesian government has this program of Kartu Prakerja. So the second question is that, have you seen anything that related to Kartu Prakerja happen? So that Kartu Prakerja means that everybody that actually losing their income, and if their income is lower than 5 million, are eligible to this Kartu Prakerja. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Budi. Hal?
Thanks, Acho. Selamat siang, and thanks very much to the speakers, to John and Yunita and Made and Rino. And hi again, hello. So just really interesting talk. Thanks very much. Very timely, very topical, and it must have been difficult to do in such a quick time frame. So I really enjoyed it. So question is, it's been touched upon a little bit, but we know from the 97-98 Asian financial crisis that agricultural resilience was actually very important in mitigating some of the worst social effects of the Krismon then. I think, Mada, you touched on this briefly, but I'd be interested to get a sense of whether we're getting a return to agriculture, rural areas on any scale. Of course, compared to last time, that is 97-98, the agricultural sector is quite a bit smaller. And secondly, we haven't got the boom in cash crop prices because of the collapse of the rupiah and the strong global economy in 97-98. So I guess there are two elements which might make it weaker. And just a quick addition, I think I'm getting the impression from you all that the emergency government support isn't yet coming through, or at least it wasn't when you were doing it. Is that applying to both the Kartu Sembako and also the PKH, the two main programs? Or is it perhaps just that, was your survey done in, was it May and June, and perhaps it was these programs hadn't really got going on any scale by then? Sekali lagi, terima kasih banyak. I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Hal. Pak Tommy, are you there? Tommy Firman? Silakan, Pak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. Very interesting research. I did I would say a similar study in in the mid 80s for my dissertation research in Sragen and Central Java, and basically I found a similar pattern with what you find in Central Java. My question is more specific: is if I wonder if in your study you find in household many some members of the family household who live not in the household but in the cities. They work and live in the cities, and they contribute to the household income by sending remittances. Now, my question is, if you find that the kind of family members, what happened to them? Are they returning to the village? Then, maybe it's becoming more burden to the family. Yeah. I think that's my question. Thank you very much. And the second one is, I wonder if you is there any publication resulted from this research? If any, then I would like to have this publication. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Tommy. Over to the panelists.
Okay, well, I've gone first every other time. Would someone else like to go first this time?
Okay, maybe Pak Made, there's a question from Hal to you, so can you respond to that?
Thank you very much, Pak Hal, yeah. And also Pak Tommy, I think, because I did also the same research on 1919 crisis. In that time, this is for my dissertation, that I got some different kind of crisis if we compare with in the situation in 1919 and this time, because in 1999 we know that I think the government still didn't do anything at that time. We just start for the what we call like bantuan in that time, but now the government, also the local people, they already has the system, the data, and also the program. That's a different what we call different with in the past. In this time, the PKH, PBNT, then also all the programs still working, but government have a new program on cash program, what we call as 600.000 per kakak per month. That's for 3 months. And now also they are continuing until maybe for the 3 months later. but still, sometimes the local, it's depends with the local government. I mean, the desa, in the desa village, the desa level, because sometimes I got some information that you know, sometimes the local government sometimes nakal in this program. So they give the program not for the right person. That's also in some way. And I think that's one. I know that totally different the situation in 1919 and now, I think. And also for the Pak Tommy, thank you very much, Pak Tommy, because I saw some. This also, if we compare with 1919, the situation also different. You know that now today, some people from rural areas, from the city, they work in the city in the past, and then now they're back to the village. And this one problem for the people, especially in the Ramadan and Lebaran, Idul Fitri. I did research in Sri Harjo now. Still doing research there. That's some people back to the village, and you know, the problem is normally in Idul Fitri they bring a lot of money to the village, but this time when the Lebaran they're back to the village, they have no money for the family village. That's make a problem. And I know I have one or two respondent informant in Sri Harjo. They in the past they are working in the urban areas. Now they start to working in the agriculture, in the pertanian, but small pertanian. I think it's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Made. Can anyone comment on the Kartu Prakerja?
Kartu Prakerja first or just?
Oh, up to you, Bu. Silakan.
Yeah. Okay, I think Kartu Prakerja already a failure, yeah. So the government already stopped it. Yeah. So it's related to those who are unemployed and return to the village. So they became a burden for the household because the household do not have enough cash and they have to support their family members who used to give remittance. Yeah, maybe Rino will talk about Kartu Prakerja, but now I will answer Pak Budi about the food security. When I started my presentation, also in one of the slides, I talked about the failure more on the marketing side, so more on the distribution, so not on the production side. So the farmers kept talking to me that the production went on. So the rice went on, the vegetables also, but cannot market it. So the for vegetables, and then it's wasted. Yes, like we can see it in the photos by Pak Made. But for the rice, actually, the security, the food, if we would like to talk broader, like you said, that it intermingled with other problems. So farmers, when where we are facilitating to cope better with climate change, the problem is that this is the climate change issue that can lead to the uncertainty of like the late start of rainy season. It means the late harvesting. It means the late start of the dry season. And if there is enough water, it's okay. If not, then it is insecure that they can earn yields exactly as yields as they can earn in normal situation without a long drought or without pesticides and disease infestation. So yes, the risk is still there. Now the pandemic is on top of that in the distribution part. So if we talk about the yields, like last season, from some farmers who can start the planting not too late, then they can still harvest in a good yields, yeah, maybe around 8 or 9 tons per hectare, around that. But farmers who have to start late because there was not enough, there is no rain and not enough water, and they suffered from pest and disease, so they only earn around less than 5 tons per hectare. So this is a big difference. And then they start again late. Now, the security, food security is not in terms of the products. Yeah. Now, this leads to the cash, like Rino said, that selling the horticulture or vegetables, fruits are failed. So it means lack of cash. Selling the food, what you call snacks produced by the women for their household is also a failure because they could only sell totally. Yes, one farmers in Pengalengan, they are able to produce a good quality of vegetables for export. This is so they have different channels. Yeah, this is for exports, for regionals, for big cities, and for local. So the main problems is for the exports, which totally stopped at the time. Yeah, during the total the PSBB. So then they have to sell it. They have the products, but how? They have to sell it at a much lower price for a good quality. Yeah, so this is, and then also the remittance, like you said, that there's no remittance from the returning migrants.
Okay,
maybe can continue.
Yeah, maybe John. I think John is going to respond.
Could I just jump in there? I think it's a good question there, Woody, but I think one thing that we need to remember is that a lot of people have lost work or are now even more insecure. So people's ability to buy protein, for instance, or other things in their staple, their basic staples has fallen. So you can see in one of the presentations from Java how people are turning back. I think it was Mada. He showed the market. People are no longer marketing vegetables. Everyone's going back to eating the basic carbohydrates. So that's one side of it. And then the price that people are getting at the farm gate is being very much reduced, even while the price maybe in the market is reasonably high. So there's this enormous gap emerging in the value chain between those two ends. But largely because of the disruption in the chain and because that there are these intermediate traders that have stepped in and are making very good profits. And then we've got all the disruptions to transportation, people being worried about catching the virus. So you get all these different elements all coming together. So you can't just think about it in terms of export markets because all of that's fallen over. It's actually a quite complex set of things that have disrupted the value chain and led to a collapse in demand, and which is also flowing through to give people much less incentives to actually produce things.
Okay, thank you, John. Let's quickly collect these last three questions. I'll start with Dirk Steenbergen. You have been very patient. Dirk?
Yes, thank you, Pat. First of all, again, echoing the previous questions, fantastic presentations and really fascinating how you're able to collect so much data in such a short period of time, really timely information. My question is for John, specifically with regards to the fisheries sector. Now, you mentioned that the conditions have obviously rocked the sector quite substantially. My question is whether your findings found at all that instead of coping mechanisms, some maybe fishers or middlemen actually were forced to exit the sector altogether? And if so, what were the factors that made some choose to exit altogether and others not? And secondly, of those that did exit the sector, what are the long-term possible implications of fish supply to that value chain? Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk. Maxine?
Hello. My question was about social assistance during COVID, and with remittances in rural communities becoming less and less, and migrants coming home, I've been thinking about how effective social assistance will be if there's a lot more pressure on households. Anyway.
Okay. Thanks, Maxine. Last one, Andre.
Okay. Hi from Kupang.
Hi, Andre. Silakan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the fascinating talks. I have one question and a couple of comments, if I may.
Quickly.
My question is, do you have any assessment on the impact of this COVID to the small island communities? So far, you've been discussing the main island, and here in NTT, Timor, we consider it as main island. It's not small island. So I wonder if you have any other information or assessment on other small island communities, because I think they're quite isolated and it's not well assessed until these days, I suppose. And my comments is on the African swine fever here in Timor. I think it's been going on since, I've been at the border too since November, and I think it's been going on since then, but there has been a denial from the local government here, and as a result, we can see the outbreak coming to the whole province. But it's been going on before the peak of the COVID, so it's been a while, and there has been a different impact on different types of pig raising farmers too. So that's one, and the last one is on the horticultural farmers here in Kupang. I've been talking to some farmers, and as Ibu Yunita mentioned, they keep growing their vegetables, but somehow along the way they managed to shift the commodity. So they changed the commodity because of the market demand. As you mentioned, there has been a growing urban farming. So most of the people now, they're growing vegetables, but they didn't grow like onion and chili. So these horticultural farmers here in Timor, I've been talking to, they said, oh, well, if we grow veggies again, it didn't work. So now they shift their commodities to chili and onion, which is more viable, and it's still in the interest of the market. So in the terms of value chain, there are some commodities that still have this high demand in the market in spite of the COVID too.
Okay, Andre.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Over to the panelists again. Who wants to take the first step?
I could take
okay, John.
And then I'll pass on to my colleagues for the other ones.
Okay.
So Dirk, what I found in interviews and in the material I read is that people are leaving a lot of fishermen are leaving the fishing industry because they don't have capital to go to sea in many cases. And the returns on, they often will get fish, but they can't sell it. So they use it for their own consumption in many cases. And even cases of many stories of bartering, people giving fish to the rice farmers and the rice farmers give rice to the fishermen. But also it depends largely on whether they've got a tengkulak or an intermediate trader who will loan the money so that they can keep going to sea. So those that are outside those sort of networks, or those who are becoming very desperate, just try and find work wherever they can. But people seem to be going to sea, but very irregularly, or not with the same regularity as the past, and often for their own consumption rather than for the market. But there are also little stories of little sectors, parts of the sector that are also operating quite well. So it's not universally that it's all falling over. It's very hard to disaggregate. There are so many things going on, and every story is very different. So it's quite challenging to actually document.
Okay, maybe anyone else?
Maybe Rino? Rino, you can say something?
It's already covered. I mean, to what question specifically?
Maybe on the social assistance for
social assistance. Yeah. I mean, because I read also a lot of questions in the Q&A,
okay.
Some of also like the situation is very dynamic. Like you get question about which exported product is collapsed. The dynamics at the beginning and now is quite different. In the beginning, a lot of products like coffee and palm oil drops, but now they say it's getting rise again. And about the social assistance, I think what I understand is there's many initiatives to reactivate small local social support system, and also because there is a there is a surat from Kementerian. They can also use 25% of dana desa to support, especially those who are affected. And I think the most what I can understand in this situation is this situation compared to 1998. It's different because this level of the crisis can expose vulnerabilities and inequalities, and also create sense of crisis in different way in compared to 1998. So, but also creates new needs. For example, also related to education in the rural area. For example, now the needs for like quota or internet quota. It's also create another means of livelihood that they have to fulfill. It's so, but they also create creativities that not some schools in the rural area, they not only use internet, but they use like radio communication. So it also creates new creativities in the local level. So how they can support is various and diverse kind of responses, I guess. I cannot see in a bigger picture, but in some particular initiatives, there are a lot of diverse responses. And yeah.
Okay, Pak Rino, our time is up, but any last word from Ibu Yunita or Pak Made?
Maybe I want to add something about the social support.
Yeah,
in rural Java, I think we have many kind of social support for the people who affected, but also for the household, the lower class. We call a program a chantelan, for example. So when someone has produced a vegetable, they just put in outside, like in the tas kresek, and then all the people can get that, can took that this vegetable. But one thing I think, when we're discussing about the social support, social assistance, I think this is just for short time. Just for short time, just in the early crisis, early COVID, but now becoming slow down again. That is the problem. I think that's enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Ibu Yunita, go ahead.
About the food estate, there's a question about food estate. Actually, I myself curious or skeptical about food estate. Yeah, so
same here.
It's better to support the farmers now, how to sustain and
Okay. Well, our time is up. I cannot thank everyone more. It's been wonderful. It's an honor to be involved in this session. We had around 100 participants, and I also see some good friends. I see Professor R.C. Balisakan also there. Hi, Professor Balisakan. Sorry, we don't have much time to engage more. But again, thank you so much, John, Pak Rino, Ibu Yunita, Pak Made, and all your team who also cannot be here. And I'll turn now to Nuke to announce what's coming next. Nuke.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ajo. We don't have any seminar scheduled for next week. However, we would really like to invite everyone to attend the COVID-19 conference that we will hold in September, in the first week of September, from the 7th to 10th of September, the 4 days conference. This is, if you haven't been to the annual Indonesia update, this would be not quite the Indonesia update, but something a bit similar. On the first day, you will have we will have the usual economics and political updates. Greg Philly and sorry, who is the speaker for the Robert Sparrow from Wageningen will be speaking. And then Dodi here is sharing the program. Dodi, would you please type in the link to register? All you have to do is just to register, and you can choose whether you just want to attend the 4-day conference or just pick one of the topics. But I can tell you that it's going to be a very, very good conference responding to the crisis. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.